Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's discussion on TheatreArtLife about accessible theatre. I'm going to introduce you to these wonderful people in just a moment, but before we get started, as most of you may know who have seen our webinars before, I have a few housekeeping to go through. So just a reminder that if you want to ask questions, there's a chat box on the right. Tell us where you're from and give us a big hi in the chat box now. We'd love to hear from you, and you can always ask questions there. So just reach out as you need to. If any reason you drop out, you can log back in anytime via the email link. And if you can't hear us, just try to log out and log back in again. Sometimes you'll need to do that. A replay is available and will be sent to you 24 hours after this session if you need to, if you have bad internet and you need to see it again. So welcome. I would just like to sort of start by saying that TheatreArtLife is beginning our journey into accessible theatre. This is an education for us as well as for you, so we're really excited about that. Coming up in January, we'll be doing a couple of one-on-one discussions with people with disabilities who work in the industry to talk about advocacy and representation, as well as Lisa Carling, who develops accessibility programs for Broadway. So we're looking forward to an entire season and series. And hopefully you will find value in that as well. So today we're speaking to Hugh. Give us a wave, Hugh.
Hello.
And Paul and Emma from Cahoots Theatre Company in Northern Ireland, and Melanie Jupp from the Smith Centre in Las Vegas. Now, Melanie has worked on the venue and the fundraising side to get accessible theatre as part of the Smith Centre program. And Cahoots is one of the theatre companies that have brought sensory-friendly performances to the Smith Centre, as well as around America and around the world and in their home country of Ireland. And so today we're going to just break it down in terms of their work and what they do and how they approach it. And hopefully you'll gain something from this discussion. And before I sort of get into showing some videos and stuff like that, let's give a little bit of an introduction, perhaps each of you, about how you came to Cahoots and who you are, and also for the Smith Centre. So maybe start with you, Melanie, just a little bit about your background, please.
Sure, absolutely. Hi, everyone. I would say good morning. It's still morning here in Las Vegas. My name is Melanie. I am the Associate Director for Education and Outreach at the Smith Centre in Las Vegas. I've been at the Smith Centre, 9.5 years prior to our building opening, and have been grateful to be part of our education team for about 8 of those years at this point. And as part of my role there, I've had the pleasure of working on our sensory-friendly initiatives.
Fantastic. Thanks, Melanie. And Emma.
Sure. So I'm Emma. I'm the Creative Engagement Manager at Cahoots NI. I've been there for about 4 years now. I started as a part-time apprentice and worked my way up to now full-time being the engagement manager.
Fantastic. And Hugh?
I'm an actor and writer. I've worked with Cahoots for a long time. It's probably must be 17 years as a performer, but also writing and developing shows. And I guess that all started because I met and worked with Paul at drama college over 23 years ago. So it began as a friendship, and now it's a kind of creative partnership too.
Fantastic. And Paul?
Hello, everybody. I'm Paul Bosco Maganini. I'm the Artistic Director and founder of Cahoots NI Theatre Company. We are based in Belfast in Northern Ireland. I join you from Armagh, which is the ecclesiastical capital of Ireland. Which is a really small village, really, if the truth be told, about 40 miles outside of Belfast. So Cahoots and I we're 20 years old, which is really frightening that time has passed so fast. We're based in Belfast. I guess we rely heavily on the visual aspect of live theatre, and no doubt we'll get into talking about how that relates to the conversations that we're going to have today. But it's good to see everybody or talk to everybody today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Paul. So let's start with Melanie. Can you tell us a little bit about the process of initiating accessible theatre at the Smith Centre and how you go about that?
Absolutely. I'll try to condense it.
It's not a small question.
I know. I'll turn it into a small answer. Don't worry. We opened, as I mentioned, in 2012, and it took us, just for the sake of capturing on a timeline, it took us about 5 years to lay the groundwork for getting ready to start exploring sensory-friendly work. And all along all those years, of course, accessibility was part of our venues, and our front of house staff really worked on that. But we hadn't really done much yet in the community in terms of our outreach and our programming. So we started in September 2017. That was our first real step toward reaching this goal, and that was with assembling our sensory friendly advisory committee. So we went out to our friends in the community who work in service organizations, or even some are medical clinics, who are serving people with disabilities and people with autism, and we just started asking them if they would like to come join us and help advise us in the process of working towards sensory-friendly programming. So we met with them in September 2017, and we had our first sensory-friendly performance in April of 2018, and that was with Cahoots, and it was a fantastic show that I'm sure we'll talk about. But it really took years of planning, years of laying the groundwork for fundraising, and our development team certainly carried the majority of that. They made sure to identify foundations and donors who were interested in this type of work and supporting this type of work. And we would just support them in offering information and context about why this was important to our organization and to our community and what we were hoping to accomplish. So yes, years of planning. And now at this point, we've done, 2 Broadway performances in a sensory-friendly format in our venue, and I would say about 4 sensory-friendly titles in our studio theater.
Fantastic. And now, Paul, Emma, and Hugh, you've brought a sensory-friendly performance to the Smith Centre. I'm interested to know what defines for you a relaxed performance, and how do you at Cahoots approach the creation of a show that's relaxed and managed on site?
Maybe I'll start with that. I think every piece of work that we now create has to fit into the category that it has to also become a relaxed performance. It's just something that is part of what it is that we do on a live stage. And really, it comes from a few different places. Interestingly, the place that it started was the demand for it. I remember many years ago trying it out as an experiment, just is there an audience for a relaxed performance? And actually we were aware within days of tickets going on sale that there was demand for such a thing. So I think first and foremost there's a demand for it, but also, it's not a really complicated thing to do. It's actually not that difficult from an artistic point of view. If when you're creating work and you're devising your own work, it's not that complicated to make it. You've got to, we'll talk about the process, I'm sure, but it actually doesn't require a huge amount of effort, for what you get in return. That's a basic response, I think, to the question.
Fantastic. And Hugh, you've been on stage and you were at the Smith Centre, correct? On the play was Shush, I Have a Plan?
Shush, We Have a Plan, yes.
We have a plan.
Shush, We Have a Plan, yeah. And I suppose that shows a very good example, and that particular event and week there that we had in Las Vegas is a great example of the process for us as a touring company, who then will provide a sensory friendly show. And the show itself has no language in it, so it's a visual treat and a sound audio treat. So in a way, it's kind of perfectly placed for the audience, the sensory audience. But there are still some adjustments and some kind of a process that we need to do to make it completely accessible. And so that's where, when we arrived at the Smith Centre, I was immediately met by, I think it was Candy, if I remember, and yourself, Melanie, and they explained that this was the first time they'd ever tried the sensory show, and for us, that was a huge honour. And the first communications, as it would be for any similar type of event, is that I'll get up in front of the audience and explain to the audience that I'm an actor in the show, and that in this show that they're about to see, there is sound, music, and lighting, and that I'm going to let them have a little taste of that experience first, just so they can acclimatize and settle into the experience. And yes, I show the technician at the back of the audience, and we go through some of those lighting and sound cues, and we find a level that everyone's happy with, and then we can begin the show. And it's almost as simple as that. The show doesn't change in any way. Simply the volume is down a little bit, and everything else is just the same. It's just that the audience knows that they can leave at any time they want, and that they're prepared for the experience that they're about to have. So that's the process for me as an actor arriving into that situation on tour.
Fantastic. And when you first performed Shush We Have a Plan in Ireland, is that correct?
We started in Ireland, yes, in Belfast.
Yeah, and when you were involved with that one, Emma?
That was a little before my time, actually, but the show has taken on many new lives throughout the years, so I have been a part of it as it's gone on in Belfast, yeah. And just something I wanted to add to what Hugh was saying, at the real heart of all our shows is magic. And often throughout our shows, we rely on an element of surprise, you know, a big reveal, a big sound effect. So part of the work that Hugh does is to try and ease the fear of those surprises and remove that element of surprise by alerting people to the things they're going to see and hear throughout the show, so that they know what they're expecting, and they still get the dazzling effect of the surprises as anyone else would, but they just have that little advance notice that it's coming.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's worth adding as well, just because we're a touring company, when we're taking a show, we will always have two versions of that show. We'll have the relaxed performance version that will be in, you know, we tour with an ion desk, so that desk will have recorded the relaxed performance, and it will also have the performance, you know, the performance is just going ahead as normal. So there are adjustments, but they're all made at the start of the process. And then, as Hugh's highlighted, when he arrives at a venue, the introduction will always be, you know, more relevant to the audience that is there on that day, and they're talked through all of the various steps of the show, the music, the lights, the sound, you know, everything that's important.
Mm. And you also, Paul, do that in every location. Is it different as you move from country to country? Like, obviously audiences are different, and are the relaxed performances also different as you move from country to country? Yeah,
I mean, to be honest, we do more relaxed performances in Ireland than anywhere else, because I think we're a little ahead of the game. It's something that all of our venues are very conscious of, and all of our venues encourage. So whenever we're promoting a new piece of work, if we're playing in the Lyric Theatre in Belfast or the Mac Theatre, we more often than not will have, you know, if we're there for a week, one of those shows or two of those shows will be a relaxed performance date. Or if we're running for a longer period of time, you know, the likes of you know, our Christmas work with the Mac in Belfast, that might be eight weeks. You know, a number of shows over that period of time will be relaxed performances. And like I say, there will be two, you know, very similar versions of the shows recorded, you know, technically within the desk. And then it's all about the introduction. It's all about making sure that everybody, there are no surprises, as I alluded to.
There you go. All right. There you go. I'm just showing you a couple of pictures of this. This is the the right one, right?
Mm-hmm.
There you are, Hugh.
Yes, I'm definitely planning.
So basically,
something.
is this children's theatre, or is it what's the story about We Have a Plan? How was that devised?
So it's actually a book. It's a children's book written by an Irish author, Chris Houghton. And we worked quite closely with Chris initially a number of years ago to try and do an adaptation of his book and bring it to the stage. I mean, the only word in Chris's book is shh. Okay. That's a word. The sound in Chris's book. So we wanted to be, I suppose I wanted to be really true to the book. I didn't want there to be any more words or sounds in the piece than that. And I suppose my journey into that world of non-verbal theatre, it's always been part of what Cahoots are about. So yeah, there's a show like Shush, there's shows like Egg. There are several pieces of our work now that's toured internationally that has this style that is I guess that is much easier in some respects to do relaxed performances of. But as I said at the start, all of our work is flexible enough to allow either a signer to come in and work with spoken word. But the process is still the same.
Fantastic. Sorry, I think you cut out a little bit at the end there. I missed that last bit. But I wanted to ask, from either perspective, and maybe we'll start with Melanie, what should people consider when thinking, if you're from a venue perspective, what would you advise people to consider when thinking about approaching accessible theatre and how to get started? How do you get started?
Really, I think the thing that people should keep in mind is, number one is their reason, their purpose for wanting to explore sensory friendly and relaxed performances. And for us, the reason was wanting, not just to go down the path of accessible theater, but to also reach a point of inclusion or even integration. Those are things that in organizations who are working with young people with autism, their goal is always integration and their young people having the same opportunities and just the same experiences as so many others. And so I think that keeping your reason at the forefront is the number one thing you need to do, because it can be a long road. As Paul said, there are certainly other countries that are further ahead in this work than many places in the US. I will say that we're coming a long way. Thankfully, we've had the opportunity to learn from so many other venues who also present sensory friendly work. But it's a lot to undertake initially if you want to do it in the most equitable way possible, where you're really ensuring that you've created an experience that on your side, on the venue side, that is integration, that is the same experience any other patron would have coming into your venue. And then the other side of that, of course, is identifying companies like Cahoots who believe so firmly in the value of this work that they automatically create versions of their works that work for this kind of audience. And that, because as you mentioned, they arrive to you and they've been busy touring and you have a few days to figure out what their show is actually going to look like in a sensory friendly format if you haven't seen it already. I had the opportunity to see Shush, We Have a Plan at iPay in, gosh, I don't remember which year, but it was probably about a year before we actually presented it. So I knew, we had a very intimate understanding that this show was incredibly magical, that it was perfectly going to translate into a sensory friendly performance. And we knew that it was just the right step for us to take in terms of our first sensory friendly show. So it really just involves keeping your reason at the forefront and just being committed throughout the whole process that what you're ultimately trying to do is create an experience that is like any other day at the theater for any other patron, only you're doing it for a specific audience. And that's something that as we actually present on the day of the show, as much as we celebrate how wonderful it is to have this audience in our house, we also do our best to really remind ourselves that we want this to be a typical day for these families. We want this to be something that they can grow accustomed to doing, whether it's a sensory or a relaxed performance, or if they one day can graduate to attending any performance that we offer, or that anyone else in the community offers. It's really just all about keeping that at the forefront, the people who you're doing this for.
Mm. And Pat asks, and maybe you can start with answering this question as well, Melanie, because I know you do offer some other ways to deal with people who are deaf or neurodiverse,
Sure.
Audio describing. So it's not just sensory friendly, you've got some other things that you provide at the Smith Center, right?
Correct. Yeah. So for any sensory friendly show, we are offering all of our modalities of accessibility. So we do have, for sensory friendly performances that involve language, we do have American Sign Language interpreters. We've actually had instances where we've needed to create additional areas of our theater to accommodate more people who needed ASL translation. We also do have audio description and we have eye caption in our venue, and those things are standard for all of our performances. And when it comes to things like our Broadway series, we do have one performance of a run that will have American Sign Language interpretation. So yes, for a sensory-friendly performance day, we have various accommodations in place, and beyond that, we try to make sure that our ticket buyers know that if they have any other need that we may not already be accommodating, that we would, we're happy to know what it is and to do our best to work with them to provide the accommodations that they need so they can have a seamless experience.
Mm. And on the Cahoots side, have you sort of been able to provide things for deaf people or with other disabilities in your shows? Is that something that's common?
I think for us, it very much depends on the venue we're touring to, what setup they can provide, and we are really up for providing any materials we can or adaptations we can make to the show to suit the audience's needs. On our most recent show, the University of Wonder and Imagination, which all takes place over Zoom, we were approached by a charity called Angel Eyes that work with children with visual impairments. And they had requested in advance a pack of visual descriptions of everything that someone might see during the show. So we were able to collate all of that from what the sets the characters were in looked like, right down to the colour of the nail polish the character was wearing and the sort of textures of their clothes, things like that. So we were really happy to provide that in advance for their users. So from our point of view, if we have lots of notice and, we are happy to provide whatever we can for the audiences.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think with the Colleen asks about the front of house point of view, and I think both of you can sort of talk about the front of house procedures in terms of, how do you welcome the guests and what changes in front of house? Is there anything you'd want to add, Emma, about what you do locally? And then maybe we'll go to Melanie.
Sure. So, a venue in Belfast that we work very closely with, the Mac in Belfast, they have a great service front of house. They have a family room with lots of soft furnishings and toys and things like that. And whenever we're doing a sensory friendly performance with them, they will have the show being live streamed on a screen outside the theatre, so that people know if they ever need to leave the theatre for any reason, if they're uncomfortable or they need a break from the surroundings, they can just go to the safe family space and continue to enjoy the show on the screen. I also know they provide ear defenders and sort of fidget toys and things like that are all available to the families, so that they can use those as they need, which is great.
I think if I can just jump, one of the other things that they provide when we do the long extended runs at Christmas is they have the set in a box, so they will go to some of the special schools that will be coming into see performances, they'll go, but they'll actually have a model of the theatre, and they'll have the corridor that children have to walk through, because sometimes it's not the set, or it's not sitting in your seat when you're comfortable and the show's about to start. It's the journey from, going in through the door of the theatre to actually sitting down in the theatre. So they have a wonderful models that they talk the children through their journey from when they arrive, the little steps they'll go up in the dark corridor, and then they'll be sitting in their seat. I think that's a brilliant initiative, and we work really closely with them as well. I should say that Cahoots, we don't actually have a venue. So we are a touring theatre company. We link up with a few of our major theatres in Northern Ireland. But I think it's why and probably what I said at the very start, which actually, is true, it doesn't require a huge amount of artistic effort to adjust a show and turn it into a show that's suitable for a relaxed performance. I don't believe it does. It requires adjustments, and it requires people like Hugh, who have the ability to stand in front of an audience and communicate effectively about what our changes are. I do think the venue has a harder task in some respects, because they've got to sell the concept. And they've all of the front of house, and they've all of the management that's needed around that. So that's what I was meaning when I said at the start of this conversation that I thought that it didn't require a huge amount of effort. I was talking creatively.
Melanie, do you want to add to any front of house procedures that you do at the Smith Centre?
Sure. Yeah, I can echo what Emma and what Paul said. We also offer fidgets to our audience members as they're entering if they need them. And everything that I mentioned previously regarding our accessibility services are managed by our front of house staff. We help if there's something that we became aware of that we need to relay to them, but our front of house manager is the one who is our accessibility coordinator. So she's always extremely instrumental. One of the things that we do is we create pre-visit guides that lay out all those steps that Paul was just mentioning. And honestly, there's something I always say, gosh, I would love a pre-visit guide for anything that involves like government work, like anytime I have to go to the Department of Motor Vehicles or anything. I would love to know exactly where I need to park and who I can expect to see and where I stand in line. So yes, this is an example of our pre-visit guide. And it even outlines things like you will walk through our security scanners. We are a venue who has security scanners in place. And this version of the guide even has an audio file for what it sounds like when your ticket is scanned, just to help people prepare. Preparedness is the most crucial thing on the venue side. You want your audience to feel prepared for what they're coming to see. And all of those adjustments that we're making are completely on the front of house side. We have no control over the creative content. So everything that we're doing, we're adjusting in front of house. We also, what else do we do? We do have quiet zones. So those are the areas where audience members can take a break in a quiet place if they need to leave the show for any reason. We in general, the theater etiquette is relaxed, so that yes, we distribute fidgets that may be related to the performance, but we also welcome people to bring in if they have specific items that help comfort them, or even snacks, which, as everyone knows, in any performance venue, food and beverage is a thing to address always. But thankfully everyone is on board that, for some people who are neurodiverse, sometimes their comfort item is a specific food or a specific drink. And we do allow those in without any problem. So that is an adjustment with our front of house crew, because that's not something that we typically allow. But otherwise, it is fairly standard at this point, I would say, kind of across the board, that the front of house adjustments that everyone is making are pretty much the same in every place, and that's what makes learning and being able to present these performances so feasible, because there are so many people to help you along the way to advise you on what they've done and what was helpful. The bathrooms one might seem funny, but that's because all of our toilets are automatically, they flush automatically, and that can be really overstimulating for someone who's not expecting it. So yes, we have a whole page on bathrooms in our guide.
That's amazing.
Is
it something?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry,
Go
I
ahead.
just want to, just Melanie, it's sort of a question for you, but a memory that I have from the Smith Centre is just how amazing your ushers were. And that's a huge part of the process too, because at the end of our show, we will actually go outside and meet the audience as they leave. And the ushers, and I remember very clearly how friendly, how warm, and how involved they were in the whole process. And that's a hugely important thing that might get forgotten. I mean, I don't know how you choose your ushers or how they're trained, but on that, you know, on those shows, that can be very challenging after the show, the excitement that's built up. And your ushers were incredible. And
Thank you.
and we were meeting some very wonderful human beings. And I remember at one point meeting an elderly couple with their son who was in his 20s, and it was the first time he'd ever been to see a live theatre performance, and it was a hugely emotional thing for us and for them and the ushers, and it almost felt like it was a big family in the Smith Centre that day. And so I just wanted to ask you how you...
Thank you.
Oh, there's a picture.
Yeah, yes, you teed up those photos perfectly. So this is an example.
Wow.
I sent this photo as an example of what our volunteer and usher crew looks like the day of a performance in our studio theater. So this is the amount of people we have on hand to assist on a day like that. And some of these people are expert volunteers from the community. Everyone in their vest and white shirt is an usher at the Smith Center. Of course, we have our wonderful performers and then some of our education staff as well. And we do, so our ushers are selected very specifically in general, but then when it comes to a sensory friendly performance, it is a hand selected process for the most part. Our front of house staff knows who will be incredibly helpful and compassionate and not just someone who is focused on following the rules. And actually, Anna, if you have the photo, he's very tall. It's the photo of the very tall gentleman, and I think this is who you might be talking about, Hugh. And I included it because it was so emotional for us as well.
Yes.
Yeah, was it Austin? Yeah.
That's a great photograph.
It is. And I almost sent the one where he's shaking your hand and meeting you. And it is a big family for us. You know, even to this day, we are in touch with this family anytime. So we share these photos with everyone on this webinar because we know we have permission from the families.
Yes.
We've made sure to follow up with them afterward. And Austin is actually in our pre-visit guide, also arriving on the golf cart, which he's perfectly ambulatory. But you know, who doesn't want to ride on the golf cart if you're offered that opportunity? But yes, we do our best to make sure that we've curated a team on the day of a sensory friendly performance that will feel like a family and that will help our guests feel that way as well. And gosh, there's one more thing I was going to say, and where did it go? It just went away. Oh, we do have trainings before the performance happens. So with everyone who is helping that day, down to our parking attendants and our security staff, just to make sure that everyone recalls and keeps at the forefront why we're here today. When we do our shows in Reynolds Hall, in our large venue, we always have a self-advocate, someone who is on the autism spectrum, open the meetings, just to tell our staff and our volunteers what they love about live performances. Sometimes if they're comfortable with it, they'll share what their personal challenges are when they attend performances. And it's just a really excellent way to focus everyone's attention on on the humanity of the people that we're working with, and that they are first and foremost people, and they are the reason that we're here today, to make sure that they have a great experience. And that's actually something that, Anna, when you mentioned in the beginning, that's something that we learned from Lisa Carling and Theatre Development Fund. That's how they start their trainings as well, on the day of an autism-friendly performance. So that helps us to really bring the family together, those trainings.
Yeah.
I think it's also worth saying, you know, in terms of casting, you know, from the creative point of view, when we now cast productions, it's something that we're very, very conscious of. We need to ensure that the performers that are going to perform the show are also capable of being doing the pre-show, the post-show conversations, meeting families. So not everybody's set out to do that or can do that as well as others. So it's interesting, you know, how that has affected casting decisions over these last 5, 6, 7 years.
No, that is interesting. And do you also tour with a stage manager that helps make those lighting adjustments? You know, with you, when you're at there to begin with, and you're talking to the audience about lighting levels and sound levels and stuff, is the stage manager the one that's, because I'm assuming you're going to work with a lot of local crew in certain theatres, yeah?
Yeah, so we're like for Shish, we have a plan. There is actually just the actors and then 2 technicians who crew. So it's usually the person who's at the back of the hall who's operating the lights and the sound, and they're usually quite visual. So I will draw the attention of the whole audience to them, and in a very light-hearted and warm and friendly way. And for our show, and for, I suppose, when trying to explain the kind of the atmosphere I'm trying to build at the start, it's just a very warm and friendly atmosphere. And it's, I think for me as an actor, a lot of that technique came from working as a street performer, first of all, and doing circle shows and learning how to eyeball and work with an audience very honestly. And you have to look your audience in the eye when you're on the street. There's no hiding from where you are and what you're doing, and you kind of learn how to approach people. And with a sensory friendly show, the audience are quite often spaced out within the auditorium, and so you can identify quickly the families and the individuals you're working with. So it's a very open and honest thing where I just say, here's the technician. She or he are going to play some of the music. We're going to put the lights on. We're going to let some of these lights, the colors change. Some of them are going to flash a little bit, but we're going to do it together, and we're going to do it safely, and we're going to make it fun. And that's, it's very hard to explain, but it's something you have to witness and be part of to see how you can go from quite just a very ordinary room into something very quite warm, friendly, and where everyone feels like they're in this together and about to begin a journey. And it always kind of works. It's just something that works whenever you approach people and you can look at them and you can have a bit of fun with them.
And just to add on to that as well, there's often times where we like to show certain aspects of the show in a really untheatrical way. Like, for example, we had a show called Milo's Hat Trick, the star of which was really quite a big bear puppet, which made quite a dramatic entrance with lots of smoke and lights and things like that, which we knew could be quite frightening. So at the start of that show, during the similar introduction, like what Hugh does, we had just one of our technicians sort of present the bear puppet, no lights, no smokes.
Is this
yeah,
it?
exactly, that's it. It wasn't moving like a bear, it wasn't walking or making any sounds like a bear, it was just the puppet, so everyone could see it in advance, could see how lovely it looked and its textures, and knew what they were expecting, which went down very well.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
One of the questions in the chat box, Melanie, is about the, I guess, funding and the money for accessible theatre, and it's something that just doesn't come out from anywhere, I'm sure. So what advice, you said you drew from the support from the community in terms of funding, and how did you fundraise for your accessible work?
So because I was looking at that question, because we already have eye caption and audio description as accessibility features in our venue, those are services that were funded long ago that we're really grateful to have. So we've had them in place for years already, and we just get to enjoy the benefit of that for our sensory-friendly performances. It's something that I did not have any involvement in the initial fundraising for those services, so I can't speak to how they happened. If I'm remembering correctly, I'm not sure if they're still funded this way, but one was actually funded through the medical community, I believe. I think through a doctor's office that does some sponsorship work in our community, and knew that service would be beneficial for our patrons. But yes, that's something that we've had standard in our venues for a long time. So we just get to enjoy being able to offer it for sensory friendly, and we're very grateful for that.
And then with regards to sort of funding for a Broadway accessible show, that is a buyout, right? So that you have to raise money for that, yeah? Yeah. So with any Broadway touring production that we come to an agreement with to present a sensory-friendly show, it is a buyout situation. So you have to work with them to determine what that amount will be. And the reason for the buyout is so you can have some, so you have an investment that enables you to be able to set the ticket prices at a cost that will be accessible for your community. One of the things that you have to remember with sensory-friendly programming and with working with people with disabilities is that oftentimes underemployment is a big thing, because we're talking about, yes, of course, all of us work in children's theater, and of course, a lot of our patrons and guests are children, but there are also people of all ages with disabilities who want access to these types of performances. And so underemployment is a huge issue in the disability community in the US at least, and just medical costs. So we do our best to make sure that our tickets are priced at a really accessible point, because that is also a part of accessibility, is making sure that your patrons can afford it. So that is a process that we work with our development team, again, to identify the best funders and to build up our funding so that we can also say we have some money in place to take advantage of an opportunity if it comes our way. So we're not constantly trying to fundraise to present this specific show that has come up. But yes, with Broadway shows, and it depends on the show. It depends on if they're equity or non-equity. It depends on who the producer is, and that can create some a big range of dollars that you're talking about. I mean, it could be something down near 50,000 or something as high as 200,000. And you can imagine the commitment that's necessary for that, because then you're literally going to your development team and saying, we need to raise $200,000 for one performance of one show to impact one audience. And that's when the importance of realizing the human impact outweighs the importance of the numbers. Mm. Well, on that, let's show the video of The Lion King, because I think that's a good example of some of the work that you've been doing, and then we'll get back to some of the questions we have in the chat.
So this really is a big day here at the Smith Center, our first ever sensory-friendly performance. We couldn't be happier than to partner with our friends at The Lion King to bring this amazing production to members of the community that might not have had a chance to see it before.
This is the first time coming to a new Broadway musical.
I want everyone to come see the show. It's going to be wonderful.
There are actually around 8,500 individuals with autism diagnosed in the state of Nevada. And this provides an opportunity for that population to experience something that they maybe have never experienced before.
To prepare for the sensory-friendly performance of The Lion King today, it took us about a year and a half of laying the groundwork and building relationships within the community.
We made a pact that we're only allowed to cry in the dark. So I can't cry in here, but could. I'd definitely be crying happy tears.
It's awesome because we've actually gone before and we weren't able to stay for the whole performance because it wasn't a sensory performance. So the fact that we can go today and you can enjoy it and be loud and run around maybe a little bit, you know, just be a kid, it's great. It's a great opportunity for us.
It makes it a lot less stressful for the parents when they might be having a moment. You don't have to feel quite so guilty about disturbing the peace of everyone else.
My only goal is to make sure he doesn't run on stage.
A sensory-friendly performance on Broadway is different from a typical performance in that intense sound levels are capped at 90 decibels. Strobe lights are eliminated where possible, and any lights that pan out into the audience, we ask that they can be cut.
Do you like the show? Yeah? How much? 10 being the best or 1 the worst? 10 the best, yay!
Our kids deserve integration, and just seeing their smiling faces. I know the cast is really excited too. And I think that today is a jumping off point for so much that we can do in the Las Vegas community to ensure that art is accessible to everyone.
This is my first time here!
The populations that we're targeting really to come in and enjoy this experience, they usually don't get to experience anything like this. They can bring in their families, their support systems, and have this awesome, wonderful experience. It truly is amazing.
The Smith Center story is really all about the community coming together, and today's a great example of just that. Donors and elected officials and people throughout the valley lending their support to make today possible.
It's wonderful. It's so nice to have this opportunity.
It was a great opportunity to really emphasize inclusion and show our whole organization and our whole community what it means to be inclusive, and that everybody deserves the opportunity to come to the theater.
Nice work. Fantastic. It's a really good video. I'm gonna show another one from Cahoots soon too. But I wanted to talk a little bit about if there's any integration with performers with people with disabilities into your companies or into the Smith Center or into Cahoots, or how you may incorporate them into your company if at all. Melanie?
It is something that it's a fantastic question and absolutely part of the overall discussion of accessibility in theater that we have to also focus on, including performers with disabilities, including, and for us as a venue, we're in a large-ish employer. We need people in our administrative offices who have disabilities. We need people on our volunteer crews and on our usher crews who have disabilities, if we're really going to be fully committed to what it means to be inclusive. It is something that we have been working on with that sensory friendly advisory committee, like we spoke about, and we were about to have our first young man with autism join our usher crew when everything shut down in March. So he was going to be kind of one of our, our advisor on how we could help more people like him have workforce opportunities with us. So for us, we can't speak too much to the performer side, but certainly as an employer, it is something that is on our radar and our wish list. We always talk about our wish list. Sensory friendly performances were on our list for years, and we know it is not a difficult thing. Just like Paul, I so appreciate how much you emphasize that this is not difficult to make a performance relaxed or sensory friendly. It's the same thing on the inclusion side in terms of people with disabilities. It is not difficult. There will always be things that we need to make sure we're following legally, but in terms of reaching people in your community and asking them to work with you, that should not be difficult.
I mean, one project where I think really highlights and if I'm being totally honest, what really catapulted us into doing a lot more, shows like what we've been talking about was in 2015, we worked with a school for the visually impaired, based just outside Belfast, and the challenge, I suppose it was an artistic challenge to begin with. I wanted to find a new way to work. All of our work is incredibly visual. So we worked with the school over a period of months saying, okay, if we were to create a brand new Cahoots NI theatre production for you, how would we do that when all of our work is so, highly visual and relies on the visual aspect of theatre? The project was incredible. I had a Charles Way, who's a very well-renowned playwright, come on board and work with me on this piece. And what we ended up creating was this huge walk-through installation. The show was called The Gift. But we learned so much more from that process that we now carry into all of our work. Like something really simple that we hadn't thought about before we did that project was, if we were doing a touch tour, which we had done in the past, don't do it after the show, do it before the show. And that sounds really simple now, but for many years we had done a touch tour for, visually impaired children post-production, where actually, if you think about it, that's pointless. Why don't you do it before? In which case, it will make more sense. But a lot of our current practice came out of that actual project, because we were working directly with those children and they were telling us exactly what needed to happen. And that show, whilst not tourable, and we're a touring theatre company because of the scale of it, it was a remarkable piece of research for us. I just remember the show started with the audience come into a room and they sat down and nobody knew that they were sitting on a revolve. Nobody knew that their seats were starting to spin, and everybody had that shared experience, whether you could see or you couldn't see. And it was the start of the show, and we made a piece that right across the board worked for everybody in that same way. So it was about creating a piece, if you were visually impaired, that wouldn't be different.
That's amazing. What about for both of you, or both groups, is in terms of communicating or managing any safety aspect of putting on a performance, especially with an audience that may take a while to get out of a theatre? Hugh, have you ever experienced a situation where you've had to stop and deal with something that's happening in the audience, slow it down?
I haven't experienced that at all. Obviously there have been some kids who've had to maybe leave, but actually very rarely. And because I think with Shush We Have a Plan, as an example, the show is so kind of, once the show begins, the music just leads you right through that journey, and it's a very visual show, so it kind of, the kids kind of get sucked into its world very quickly, and it's quite, the music's quite soothing in its own way, and any bit that's kind of up tempo is fun, almost cartoony type music. So I haven't really experienced anything that's been disruptive at all, ever, which is fantastic. But I know that myself and the actors that I work with would be absolutely ready to support anyone, and the theatres that we've done this type of performance in are always so communicative that we're always ready for anything to happen and ready to act in the safest ways.
I think one of the big things in a relaxed performance is a lot of parents are conscious of their child making a lot of noise, and actually what we say at the start of our performance is that's to be encouraged. Particularly a lot of the non-verbal pieces that we tour, we want, that's fine. There is that's allowed, that's okay. So, I think a lot of what I love about working with young people in young people's theatre is that they haven't conformed to the rules that we as adults have. when we go to theatre, where we've got to be quiet and we've got to look that way. I love the fact that young audiences haven't conformed to that yet. So that's something that we encourage, particularly the non-verbal piece where the music is there to guide you through the story. But if you see something, it's okay to go, wow, or the reverse of that.
That's amazing. And Melanie, I think from your perspective, I guess you've probably got some extra staff and people monitoring the situation in case there needs to be an evacuation or whatever from a venue perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very good question and something good to be aware of, especially when you're talking about some of our larger performances. You know, for a show like The Lion King, we had, I would say about 1,800 people in the house that day. And it's very valid to worry about some kind of large-scale safety concern. In that case, that's where we rely heavily on our front of house staff and their training. And they do regular, I don't want to say drills, but regular reminders and procedural practice of how to evacuate the hall. Because our front of house manager is also our accessibility lead, she thankfully is very attuned to what that means in terms of if you have a house full of people with varying disabilities. Of course, that's worst case scenario that no one wants to think about, but we do. And then there are always the well-meaning concerns of, but what about if it's just one patron? What if it's someone who needs something? Do we need to have medical, sometimes for certain performances, being in the entertainment capital of the world where people like to have fun, for certain performances, we may have an ambulance just kind of on standby, just in case someone has had a lot of fun before coming to the show. So we had questions in our initial planning years of do we need to have medical on standby? And it was something that we heard repeatedly from our community partners. No, remember, this is number one, this is disability and it's okay. Number two, people are with their families or with caregivers or with friends who know them and who know how to support them should something arise. And that was very comforting to us, and it's completely true across the board. They know if the person they're with needs some type of assistance, and they can alert anyone. So that is part of the reason for our augmented. We do have what we call expert volunteers in the house with us that day, in addition to our front of house usher crew. And those expert volunteers are people with certifications or licensures in working with people with disabilities or people on the autism spectrum. And occasionally that does involve medical doctors, which helps us feel even better just to know that they're there. But just logistically, we're also lucky to be positioned physically in close proximity to emergency services. So we have that comfort as well.
Wonderful. Vanessa has a great question, and maybe for the Cahoots team. Any other advice for theatre makers in disciplines such as pop, props, or costumes when you're thinking about devising a show for sensory-friendly for sensory-friendly people that need sensory-friendly accessibility? I can't speak apparently now. Is there anything else, like in terms of the look and the feel? You said your shows are very visible, like visually stimulating, Paul. So is that part of the process, and how do you approach that? And is there a particular thought about what would be appealing to those kind of audiences?
Yeah, I would say artistically, we don't change anything. The best show that we want to make is the show that we make. I think where compromises, if that's the right terminology, is in the tech, is when you start to add effects on top of the story. I don't think I've ever, with the exception of the show that I've talked about, The Gift, which was a very, very different model, and I think, as I said, influenced everything and a lot of what we do now. But we always go into a room to make the best piece of theatre possible. We're not going into a room to compromise on anything. So in terms of storytelling, no, I don't think there's anything that we do when we're rehearsing a piece that we go, oh yes, this is going to make it more accessible, because you're telling a story. But I think when you get into the tech and you start taking down the lights and you start adding in, those theatrical layers, of blackouts, moving lights, large sound effects. They're all the things that actually are outside of the story. So the key ingredient is always the most important ingredient. It always stays true to what the piece is. And that's, again, going back to one of my earlier comments, that's why it's easier to sort of just adapt that final stage, that technical aspect of a show, to make it accessible for everybody. Because you've still got, at its very, very heart, you've got that story and the essence of what it is you're doing.
And I would just say as well that you could always ask for advice on a bit of a test run. If you have some families in your community that would be the perfect audience for this show, you could invite them in, treat them, let them have a preview and gather their thoughts.
Test it out with them, yeah. I'd like to show one of your videos, which is a testimony about We Have a Plan, because I think it's a wonderful example of your work. So let me play this.
So hello, my name is Jennifer Mcgrath, and I am the Vice President of Education here at the Orpheum Theater Group in Memphis, Tennessee. And I want to say what an absolute pleasure and honor it has been to host Cahoots here for these past few days with their performance of Shh, We Have a Plan. The show is absolutely spectacular and stunning. All of our school audiences that came in just had a blast and have been raving about the show. And today, as part of our Saturday series, it was an extra special performance because we were fortunate enough to be able to do a sensory-friendly performance so that we could be inclusive to all young people and their families, and it was an absolute success. I had so many moms and dads on the way out in tears or in a state of emotion saying how generous and kind and wonderful it was to have this performance, and I think that what really set it above the top was the extra special things that the company did to make sure that everyone in the audience felt safe and comfortable, the fact that they could get up and leave as they needed, that they could emote and make sound as they needed, and the introductory demonstration by Hugh of the lights and the sounds, and Sally up running the tech, all of those things so that our audience could really feel safe and understanding of what was about to happen. And then they were able to go on a magical journey with you all, and you really took them there, and it was wonderful. It was wonderful to see them enjoying it. And I even take it one step further to say that it was also really lovely to see the families without young people with sensitivities sort of being exposed to that world and being respectful of it and supporting their fellow community members. It was really a beautiful thing.
Superb. Let me just finish that. Wonderful. Well, we have actually hit our hour. We've talked ourselves to death in this hour. So thank you so much, guys, for joining us today. I know that a lot of people have a lot more questions, and so do I, but we're going to have a number of panels coming up in January, so please keep an eye out for those. We can start to look and answer all of these other questions that we have in the chat box at the moment, and also, you can always email me, and we can start to put those questions together to discuss with some of the people that we have with disabilities that will be talking about accessibility and working with disabilities in the industry that's coming up in January. So please keep an eye out for that, as well as Lisa Carling, who that Melanie's worked with closely on accessible theatre at Broadway. So hopefully you'll join us for those. Emma, Hugh, Paul, and Melanie, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your experience today. Really appreciate it. And any final words that you'd like to say on accessible theatre, on your work, or anything, COVID, Christmas, let us know. Melanie, go for it.
Oh gosh, Anything on accessibility, just start and do your best to learn and keep learning. It is constant learning. I am constantly learning, and just don't be afraid to try.
Yep,
Wonderful.
totally. I echo that. Going into 2021, we all want to learn more and put it into practice.
Fantastic.
We all.
Oh, you're on mute, mate.
Oh.
There I am. Is that me back?
Yeah, that's you back.
I turned it off for the video. For me, communication is key between the artists, the companies, the venues, and the audience. Just keep communicating, and I just like to say Happy Christmas to everyone.
Thank you, Hugh. And Paul?
Yeah, I'd echo all of that. I would say from a theatre maker's point of view, and if I'm talking to any theatre makers out there, really, it doesn't take a huge amount of effort to make your work accessible. It really doesn't. And actually, you find it one of the most rewarding things you can do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I saw a note about things being captioned, and it is my goal of 2021 to have all my webinars captioned post-production and get some international sign language on our webinars in this 2021 period. As I am exposing myself and learning myself, that's definitely the goal. The replay tonight will not have captions, but maybe later this week we'll be able to get captions on this one. So I really want to make sure we get accessibility on our perspective from TheatreArtLife as well. Just a note, next week, if you're interested with the We Make Events UK, we are having a discussion on mental health and why it needs to take priority post-COVID. We've got Ace Piva and Janine Diaz, who work in the concert touring industry, and they're talking about mental health and wellness, and it's a really fascinating discussion because these people are amazing. So that's a free registration. Head over to TheatreArtLife.com if you would like to register for that webinar next week on the 28th. And the whole January lineup will be out soon, hopefully just before Christmas. So stay tuned for that. Thank you very much, everybody. I really enjoyed this discussion tonight, and I thank you so much for your time so close to Christmas.
Thank you.
Much, Anna.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas.